First, I want to thank the Committee on Episcopacy for the ways in which they repeatedly tried to mark and appreciate Bishop O's and my retirement during such a crazy time. They sent gifts, and because Bruce whined so much that all he wanted was a cake, they sent each of us a cake. And Bruce ate the whole thing. In the summer of 2020, since we couldn't meet in person anyway, and I was expecting to really retire soon, Ken and I had purchased a home in California, and we had expected to move in September. But we decided to make a mad dash across America ahead of our moving van and set up living in Napa, California, where Ken's brother and his wife's sister, who was in memory care across the street from them, and our niece and her husband and two of his sons all live in that one town. Let me just tell you, we have had more family dinners in the last 2.5 years than in more than 45 years of marriage. As you know, the Council of Bishops elected me to be the ecumenical officer, and for all intents and purposes, the work began in the summer of 2020. Usually the ecumenical officer does a lot of travel, but because of the pandemic, I really didn't begin to travel until about a year ago. But all those hours of Zoom as the ecumenical officer and an officer of the Council of Bishops has kept me very busy. But in March of 2022, I became the interim bishop of the California-Nevada Annual Conference just to make sure I had no extra time whatsoever. It's been a challenge to do both, but a blessing to get to know some of the people of the conference, the area in which I expect to live out the rest of my life. Often retirement reflections are a projection of the hopes of what one is going to do in retirement. But in our case, we've been retired for some time now. And in addition to my jobs, which sort of makes a retirement service seem a little odd, I want to share a bit about what I enjoy doing in my supposed retirement. People often think of Napa as wine country, which of course it is, but it's so much more. I always feel sorry for people who think that going to Napa is about wine tasting, and then they miss the absolute beauty of the area. You know, before our church in town started meeting in person, and it was really over a year, we would go hiking every Sunday morning for hours, 3, sometimes even 4 hours. And we enjoyed so much being a part of God's great cathedral of creation. And can you imagine what it's like after 40 plus years of pastoring churches and being a DS and a bishop, and then being able to do that on a Sunday morning, not to mention together. Hiking the valley, the mountains, the San Pablo Bay, which is like a marshland, a ridge over the Pacific Ocean or the headlands, or even an occasional walk across the Golden Gate Bridge into San Francisco, it's restoring of the soul. I said for a couple of years before I retired, when people asked me what I wanted to do, I said, I wanted to be outside. And I do spend many hours a day outside, running, sometimes sitting and doing my work, or reading, taking walks. We do all of our errands by walking. It's an outdoors culture. with the benefit of lovely weather. As Mr. Ken Ehrman likes to say, he has yet to shovel snow in Napa, California. In addition to being outside, in December of 2020, I purchased an electronic piano that is the caliber of a very good regular piano. It's not a Steinway, but we don't have room in our little house for that. And I literally picked up the music that I had put down 50 years beforehand and began to practice. Well, it was a little rough going at first, but now I thoroughly enjoy the benefits of practice, muscle memory, a good ability to sight read, which is how I got through all of my lessons, and pouring myself into the music that I've always loved. And when I read the music that my teacher brought me through, and she has little markings on the pages, it's like one in the cloud of witnesses who is sending me a message on that very page of music. And I think who I was when I was 18, and I still love Beethoven's sonatas. That too is restoring to my soul. Because this is kind of my only retirement service, I want to thank those who have been entrusted to me over the years of my ministry. The people of Faith United Methodist Church on the near west side of Cleveland, where I learned community organizing without one single class. Church of the Redeemer in Cleveland Heights, probably the sweet spot in my pastoral ministry as we navigated being a racially and economically diverse congregation and became the first reconciling congregation in East Ohio. As a DS in what was then the Worcester District, now it's dispersed through other districts, with their wonderful people and beautiful, picturesque scenery. Garfield Memorial on the far east side of Cleveland, where I didn't stay long enough to do all I could envision, but it was out of that church that I was elected to the episcopacy. I loved serving Minnesota. As their bishop, I learned so much and enjoyed living in that great state. And of course, the challenges of Northern Illinois. It was a culmination of all of my previous ministry experiences, urban, suburban, and rural. And I will forever love having lived in the West Loop of Chicago. Thanks for the ministries. People ask what I think my legacy has been. I don't think it's up to me to say, but it's in the impact that my ministry has had on others, and that's for you to judge. But in addition to providing administrative and governance to the annual conference that I've served, my passions that I've tried to squeeze into the cracks of time and influence have been to help local churches think about using what they do have instead of wishing that they had something else. Holy, healthy habits, holy conferencing, and care of creation. Whatever seeds have landed in whatever fertile places, I simply rejoice. I do want to thank Mr. Ken Ehrman, who has always been supportive of me. He stuck to the commitment to live in my parsonage so that there was one less complaint about having a woman pastor in those days. You know what I mean? He left a vibrant, growing ministry in Westlake, Ohio, to move with me to Minnesota. And then he left Minnetonka United Methodist Church, which was one of the fastest growing congregations in Minnesota, to go to Chicago. But he ended his active ministry at Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary as faculty in contextual ministry. And he got a nice sports car along the way. Thank you, Mr. Kennerman. The church is filled with people like us, far from perfect, but seeking to faithfully serve Christ and the church in the world. I've had a lover's quarrel with the church, as many of you, most of my life. And when I've quarreled with it, it's been because of my love. I have been hurt by the church, as many of you. But more times than not, I think on balance, the woundedness has motivated me to work for a church that stops doing harm to others. I have literally begged for space in this church, as many of you. Specifically, at a Council of Bishops meeting once. And although there was barely nominal response, I have worked to make space for all. And I mean all. Not just LGBTQI+ people, but people who authentically relate to God and worship differently than I do. I have rolled my eyes at the church, at the pettiness of it, as many of you. But I've also succumbed to its pettiness in my own spirit, requiring the need for God to create a new and right spirit within me. The church, since I was 14 years old, has given me a world in my eye, coming to know and love people who are different from myself in every way. But it's also given me the opportunity not only to learn to love, but to forgive my enemies. So I still have a lover's quarrel with the church because I love it, and I give thanks for it, especially the United Methodist Church. You, as representatives of the United Methodist Church and all these specific ministries, I want to thank you for giving me all these opportunities and more.